If you grew up in church, you know this. The Apostle Paul wasn't always the Apostle Paul, right? He was Saul of Tarsus, who hated Christians, hated them. In fact, his career was to wipe out the church. He was against it until he was for it. It's an interesting story. And he didn't become a Christian because he read the Bible. It had not been written. He became a Christian because of something that happened. So we're going to listen to this conversation. And my goal today is not for you to believe anything is true. My goal today is for us to listen to how someone who knew the people who knew Jesus presented the message of Christianity to a group of people who had never heard any of it before. Because in this conversation, we get to the very center, to the very heart, and I believe we get to the starting point of the Christian faith. So, here we go. While Paul was waiting for them, he was waiting for a couple friends to arrive there in Athens. While Paul was waiting for them in Athens, he was greatly distressed to see that the city was full of idols. Now, this is the same Athens, Greece that you can visit today. It's on my list. And there Paul is, and he's looking around, and there are idols everywhere. So he reasoned in the synagogue with both Jews and God-fearing Greeks. These are God-fearing Greeks were Greeks that had become Jewish, all right, in the synagogue as well as and this is where our story really begins to build, as well as in the marketplace, day by day with those who happen to be there. So picture this. Paul is just walking around, and he's engaging in conversation, engaging people in conversation about religion, okay? And Athens is full of philosophers, so this wasn't hard to do. So he went to the synagogue and talked to them about what he saw and what he had heard and what he learned and what he believed. Then he went out into the marketplace just to engage people in conversation about religion. A group of Epicureans. And Epicureans believed, hey, we can't figure it out. Who cares? Have a nice day and an extra glass of wine. Sounds a lot like where we live, doesn't it? All right? And Stoic philosophers who said, hey, if you give us enough time, we can figure it all out. We're going to sort through it all, examine the evidence, and come to a conclusion. So he meets a group of them who were philosophers, and he begins to debate with them. So Paul, here he is, he finds a group of people that were willing to engage with him at a deep level about religion and about philosophy and about ideas, okay? And now some of them ask, what is this babbler trying to say? And here's why. Because they had never heard any of this before. This was brand new. They were starting at the beginning. Others remarked, I think he's trying to advocate for a foreign god. Now we absolutely miss this, but this is a huge deal because if you're going to introduce a new god in Athens, there were already so many, they couldn't even keep track of them all. Because if you're going to introduce a new god in Athens, you got to get permission. Because in the past, in cities like this, if someone came in with new ideas, it could split the city. They could have a civil war. It would split families. Houses would burn. It was tragic. So if you're going to introduce a new idea, you have to get permission. Now look, they said this seems like a new religion because Paul was preaching good news about Jesus and the resurrection. Now, again, everything Paul knew about Jesus came from people who knew Jesus. And everything that Paul believes about the resurrection came from people who saw a risen Lord. Nobody had read anything because there was nothing to read at this point in history. So then they took him and brought him to the meeting of the Areopagus, where they said to him, may we know what this is? And here it is. What is this new teaching that you are presenting? In other words, hey, this is new. We want you to start from the beginning and explain it to us. We've never heard any of this before. And here is what is an interesting thing. You can actually go to this place, the Areopagus. Here it is, the Areopagus. And the Areopagus means, that word means the hill of Ares. And in Greek mythology, this is supposedly where Ares was put on trial by the gods for murdering Poseidon's son. So this was a really important place. And you can visit it today. And this is really cool. When you visit Greece or when you visit Athens, you can stand where the Apostle Paul stood. Cool, right? And listen, the reason I'm making such a big deal out of this is what I'm telling you today is not just a Bible story. Remember, there's no Bible yet. This is something that happened. This is where this took place. And the reason they took him there is because this is a revered place in the middle of Athens, and it was considered a place of judgment, okay? So this is where they had civil trials. This is where they made decisions. And if you were going to introduce something new to the city, this is where the city council would meet to make that decision. So they actually took the Apostle Paul to this very spot to decide whether or not they were going to allow him to spread this new idea that no one in Athens had heard about before. Okay? The story continues. They said, "You are bringing us some strange ideas, bringing some strange ideas to our ears, and we would like to know what they mean. So, Paul, would you please, for our benefit, and for the benefit of the city council and the elders of the city, would you please start from the beginning?" See it? I mean, how incredible is this? So here we go. Here's about 20 years after Jesus, somebody explaining the whole story to people who knew nothing. This was their starting point. Paul then stood up. He stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, people of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, "To an unknown God." This is interesting. So there are altars all over the city, okay? All representing all these different gods, okay? They're just trying to keep them all straight, all these deities. And just in case they missed one, there was this just in case altar. Just in case they missed one, they actually built an altar to the unknown God. Who is this God? Well, we don't know. But if that God shows up, we can say, we were expecting you. We just didn't know who you were. We just didn't know what name to put on here. And what this said to Paul, and what he leverages here is this, and this is true of all religions, is that there is uncertainty, okay? Here's what I know, but there's a lot that I don't know. Here's what I'm sure of, but there's a lot I'm not sure of. Here's what to expect, but there's a lot of unexpected. And so, hey, they had this altar to the unknown God. And I know, we laugh. I laugh. But many of us are the same way. This is why some of us go to church on Christmas and Easter, just in case. I don't know, but just in case. Some of you have a special piece of jewelry, and if something bad happens, you feel like you have to touch it, just in case. Some of you, kind of in your mind, you run through some old verses you learned as a child, like, we're not sure how it works, but just in case. So Paul says, look, you're very religious. You want to know what's out there. You know there's something more out there, something bigger than you. You don't just... you don't know what it is. So he says, and this is a strong English word. It didn't come across this way in his language, but he says, so you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. Now, what he didn't mean you're dumb ignorant, because they aren't dumb ignorant. They're philosophers, right? But Paul was saying this. Paul was saying, you are guessing. You are guessing, aren't you? Come on, guys, you're guessing. Okay, yeah, Paul, we're guessing. You're not certain, are you? No, we're not really certain. If we were certain, we certainly wouldn't have this around, right? This means we don't know. Unknown equals we don't know. And then Paul says this. This is so great. He says, and this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. Come on over here, Paul says, to the altar of the unknown God, because I'm about to take the un off, okay? I'm about to make known to you something you do not know. Isn't that awesome? And then he begins. The God, he says, the God who made the world, the one God, not the pantheon of Greek gods, but the one true God, the God who made the world. And everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by human hands. Paul says, I'm getting ready to tell you about this unknown God. First, he's bigger than all the rest of your gods put together. In fact, you can't build a temple for him. He's so big, he couldn't fit. He's the Lord of heaven and earth. In other words, he's saying this: you may find the most fantastic painting in all the world, but you won't find a painter in the painting. You might find the most incredible sculpture in the world, but you won't find the sculptor in the sculpture. And so it is with the world, this big, fantastic, complex world that reflects the glory and the greatness of God. The good news is it reflects his glory and his greatness. The good news is you can discover a lot about God in his creation, but you will not find God in creation. He's just too big. He won't fit. So don't bother trying to build him a temple. He certainly could not fit on your little bitty altar. He does not live in temples built by human hands, as if he needed anything. He's saying, come on, guys, all your little bitty gods, you take them incense, you take them gifts and snacks and whatever, you put some stuff out there, a little piece of gold or silver. You just always trying to bribe your gods. Your gods always need something. You always trying to get your gods to do something for you. You always trying to do things for your gods and trying to please your gods. Now, let me tell you about the unknown God. See, he doesn't need any of that. This isn't a God that needs anything from you. This is a God that is self-sustaining. He is the God that sustains the universe. He doesn't need a thing from you. Rather, look at this. Rather, he himself gives everyone. He himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. Everything that's good that has come into your life has come from this big, massive creator God. And the Apostle Paul goes on to say that God has done something as proof that he knows us, as proof that he loves us and that he can be known. So the starting point for the Christian faith is not the church. The starting point for the Christian faith is not just believe the Bible. The starting point for the Christian faith, whether they told you this before or not, is a question. The question, the foundation, the thing every one of us has to deal with. If you're interested at all, whether you're asking questions about faith for the first time or you're coming back and trying to restart your faith, there's just one question. It's always going to be the foundation of restarting your Christian faith. And the question is this. The question is, who is Jesus? And so when Paul has his one opportunity with people that don't know anything about the story, he starts with creation. He starts with the fact that God cares. He goes on to the point that God has revealed himself in a man. And if you have a hard time believing it, which of course you do, God proved it. God proved it because he knew we'd be skeptical. He knew we'd have doubts. And so he raised him from the dead. Because he is Savior and he is Lord of all. Why? Why? God did this. God did this so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. And that is the starting point for the Christian faith. That is the question. And that will always be the question. So regardless of what has happened to your Sunday school faith, regardless of what has happened in your past, regardless of what has happened in your unanswered prayers, regardless of the pandemic or anything else that comes our way, the question is, it always will be, who do you think Jesus is?